Hello everyone, and welcome back to JAS Reviews. My name is James, and on this channel I do reviews of both music and movies, along with the occasional commentary piece, so if any of that sounds interesting to you, then please leave a like on this video, and subscribe to my channel to see more content like that. And today I am bringing you another episode of Quick Movie Reviews. Similarly to the more recently released episode of Quick Album Reviews, I have been doing a lot of catching up on movies, and still have quite a bit left to go, so this episode will be a little bit all over the place in terms of the movie release dates, but these are all movies I wanted to just touch on for one reason or another. So let's not waste any more time. Let's talk about the first movie I will be discussing on the docket. So first up is one of the most positively rated movies of the year and one of the most lauded horror movies of recent memory, I would say, by both critics and audiences alike, with universal love and not much negative to say about it, and that is Sinners, directed by Ryan Coogler. And yeah, I think you should believe the hype with this one, is all I'm gonna say. This is an incredible achievement. I am just still blown away whenever I think about this movie. It is a visual masterpiece with just so much incredible stuff going on. It is genre-defying and incredibly risk-taking. I do think there's a reason why this is the most successful horror movie, and I think it's because it's just a crowd pleaser. It is one that is able to appeal to a large audience. The main characters, both played by Michael B. Jordan, are excellent, and I love how he shifts between these two characters and gives them both very distinct personalities. Haley Steinfeld is great from her shift from more vulnerable individual who was in a relationship with one of the two twins to being a very menacing vampire with a little bit of a cartoonishness to her. And Jack O'Connell is great as the main villain, Remick. He is creepy, but you also sort of understand his motivation. And I think Wunmi Mosaku is excellent as Annie, maybe the most sympathetic character here. And I like that what the movie does with her, it doesn't give the other characters a cliche of not believing her in terms of when she tells them what they need to do when they take down the vampires. Instead, they just go right along with it. But man, the standout here, and I think a lot of people are going to say this, is Miles Caton as Sammy Moore. He gives just an incredible performance, and it's just a flex to be a great actor, but also a legendary singer. He has a beautiful voice, and I mean, it is one where when you hear it, you would believe that it would break the barrier between the spirit world and the living world. I mean, there's so much to laud about this movie, and I feel like I would be repeating myself because of how many people have talked about it, but I mean, I can't go without mentioning the breaking of the barrier scene between the spirit and the human world. It is one of the most impressive things I've seen. It left my jaw hanging open the first time I saw it. I don't know if there's many things like it out there. It is just undeniably well done. The vampires are menacing here, and I like the unique take on them and making them not entirely hateable, but they are still decidedly the antagonists, and I think it's interesting you understand their motivation for why they're doing what they're doing, as well as the commentary on how minorities were treated, as well as the idea of how far you go in pursuing your art and in pursuing what you're passionate about. It's all very interestingly put together, and all these very complex things are talked about very well. I do not have a single complaint about this movie, really. I loved every aspect of it. I think it is excellent. If you haven't seen it, you're missing out. That's all I can say. It's my favorite movie of the year right now, and it's going to be very tough to beat it out. 5 out of 5 stars for me. And yeah, I think it's deserving of that rating. Next up is Bring Her Back from the directors Danny and Michael Philippa, who also made the movie Talk to Me, which, if you'll remember when I reviewed that a couple years back, I wasn't as impressed by it as some others were. In fact, if anything, the movie has shrunk on me over time. I just didn't find it to be that scary, and I found the plot to be a little bit all over the place, but I was still open-minded to seeing how this new movie would fare, and the trailers did intrigue me, and I'm very happy to say that this one is a huge step up for me. I can unequivocally say that I really enjoyed this movie. I think it is a better version of what Talk to Me was doing in every way, shape, and form. It is once again about loss, like Talk to Me was, But this time, the loss is talked about in many different ways that I think are pretty interesting. We have the loss of who is technically the main character, Sally Hawkins' Laura, who has lost her daughter, and we find out that she is trying to bring her daughter back in some very dangerous ways. But you also have Andy and Piper, our child duo, who are, I would say, the protagonists of the story, who are going through the loss of their father and are trying to deal with that and their complicated feelings around it, specifically Andy's complicated feelings around it. It is brutal. It is one of the most unforgiving horror movies I've seen in the violence. It is cringe-inducing at times. There are parts that really made me just want to shrink away. And there's not many movies that can have that effect on me, so this one was impressive in how it did that. And I do think it may be the scariest horror movie I've seen this year, even if it's not the best. I do think it's the scariest. The tension is high throughout. I really like the ritualistic VHS tapes they used. Also, just huge credit given to Sally Hawkins for playing an incredibly tough character to pull off. I think a character that is remarkably hateable, but you still have to feel some sympathy for. She manages to pull it off very well and make a character that is very interesting. I think that our two new actors here, or all three actually of our new actors, are great. Billy Barrett is awesome as Andy. I really liked the arc they took his character on, and I just found him to be incredibly sympathetic. Sarah Wong is also great as Piper, and it's very interesting how they use her sight or her lack of sight as an element in the movie. I think they use it very well, and I think they make her a great character as well. I really liked the arc that she went on too. And then there's Jonah Wren Phillips as Oliver. This is a very impressive early performance for this actor. He really delivers with his largely physical performance. As I was saying, the scares in this movie are excellently executed. There are just so many scenes that send literal chills up your spine. I think they are very well done. I think the thematic arc of dealing with grief is interesting and is better executed than it has been as of late. I have seen a lot of grief horror movies lately. Some this year that'll be in my worst movies of the year that I'll be talking about. But this one nails it far better, and I think it's because it gives some actual emotionality behind it and treats it in a more unique way. And I do like that the grief here and how it's manifested isn't just symbolic. It is also very much so literal, what our main character Laura is doing. So I think this movie does have that going for it as well. This is a very strong movie, and after this, I can definitely say that I'll be checking out this directing duo's future movies because this is a very impressive step forward for them. No doubt about that. Strong 4 out of 5 stars for me. Could be one of my favorite movies of the year. Next up is the latest from Marvel, Thunderbolts. Now, I'm not sure if I would say that Marvel has definitively fallen off by any means, but I do think that they are definitely not as popular as they used to be. I do still think they bring out good content every once in a while. I don't think that they are constantly releasing a streak of bad movies, but the bad are definitely more noticeable now than they used to be. And I am actually, just as a note, looking back at all the Marvel movies, and I think probably by the end of the year, I'll have a ranking of all the Marvel movies, including this one. And let's go ahead and talk about Thunderbolts while we're here. So Thunderbolts leans on to a formula that I think is pretty comfortable for Marvel. And this has been a comfortable thing for them, I think, as early as Avengers, and putting together a group of people who don't necessarily get along because of all their different personalities, but they eventually learn to work together and learn to love each other's flaws and overcome their inner darkness. I think a lot of people do compare this to Guardians of the Galaxy, and I understand why, but this has been a Marvel formula of a ragtag team for quite some time. I think this is a pretty great Marvel movie. Now, is it anything necessarily mind-blowing? No, but I do think what works about it really does work. I have to give a primary compliment to something that I think Marvel lacks a lot of the time, and that is that they have a good villain here. The villain is menacing, and I do like that he actually gets an earned redemption arc here, and I think a lot of credit for that has to go to Lewis Pullman's just excellent performance as this character. He is able to nail the transition from the more funny, quirky character he is at the beginning to the genuine menace that he is in the climax of the movie. It is a really cool turn that he does, and I think he pulls it off well. And the real villain here is also pretty well done in Julia Louis-Dreyfus as Valentina. She nails the sort of corporate overlord type of vibe where she acts like she cares, but really she's only in it for the money. Really, I mean, besides those two, the highlights here are obviously our main group of people that are just so fun to follow along with. Florence Pugh, once again, proves herself to be one of the best modern actresses working right now. She is excellent in this as Yelena. I wasn't necessarily wowed by her performance in Black Widow, but then again, that movie wasn't very wowing in the first place. So I think this movie really gives her a chance to prove herself, and I think she does. I also think that Sebastian Stan continues to prove himself as one of the great original Marvel actors as Bucky. I think that David Harbour is hilarious as Alexei. He is definitely the comedic relief here, and I think he nails it, but also has some emotional moments that he pulls off well, similarly to what he does in Stranger Things. He is great at going between those different types of performances. Wyatt Russell is awesome as John Walker. I didn't necessarily get much out of him in the Captain America and the Winter Soldier TV show that I didn't even finish, but I do like what he brings to the table here. I think all the main ragtag group of people are good here. I think they all give great performances, even though I do think Florence Pugh is the obvious standout here. I like that the movie embraces the characters' flaws and brings them together to overcome those flaws and become genuine heroes. It is an inspiring story that is a tried and true one, and I think the formula works here once again. If there were any negatives I had to give about this movie, I guess the main negative would be that it sort of throws its theme in your face about dealing with depression and dealing with the darker parts of yourself. I wish it had been a little bit more subtle about it, but then again, Marvel has never been about subtlety with some very minor exceptions. I also do think that some of the action isn't super mind-blowing here, although it does look nice, and I will say it's a plus that this looks like a really well-filmed Marvel movie, whereas some of the ones that have come out more recently have looked like CGI slop. But yeah, outside of some of those negatives, I do think I genuinely really enjoyed this Marvel movie. I'm not going to say it's a top 10 for them or anything, but it is a good Marvel movie, and I think could be a place where they can move forward from here, and I'm really hoping that they continue on this winning streak that they're on now. I really do like this one, and I am looking forward to Fantastic Four coming up soon as well. Solid 3.5 out of 5 stars for this one. Next up is the movie The Ugly Stepsister, which was a Shudder original, and this one was out in theaters for a time, but I did not get a chance to see it there. Instead, I checked it out on streaming, and yeah, this one takes a very Grimm Brothers route on the Cinderella story, except makes it even more gross. And I think a lot of people are going to compare this movie to The Substance, and I can sort of understand why. It has a similar thematic arc of a woman dealing with body image issues. I actually think this is a pretty cool take on the Cinderella story, and I think the commentary on body image in particular is well done. I don't think it's quite as strong as The Substance, but I do appreciate that it takes a bit more of a different approach with it. And I wouldn't say it's a subtle approach by any means, because the things that our main character does here to essentially make herself more beautiful in her eyes, Elvira is her name, I mean, there are some real extremes. She eats a tapeworm, and the tapeworm eats her from the inside so that she can consistently stay thin. And eventually, because obviously the tapeworm is going to have bad effects on her, she eventually has to take the tapeworm out, and it is one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen. It still makes me shudder when I think about it. I think that Leah Myron is very impressive as Elvira. She takes this character and makes her incredibly sympathetic, and you just really feel for her and her struggles. And I mean, it's a very prescient commentary on women body image that very much so would be how women were treated in the time, but is still how many women are treated now, and that's meant to be a point that the movie makes, and I think it makes it very well. Thea Sophie Loch Ness is good as essentially the Cinderella character here. I found her to be very interesting, and I like that the movie doesn't necessarily make her entirely good-hearted here. They actually give a little bit of a different take on her, even though you definitely do feel bad for her in terms of her having to be a servant. She doesn't necessarily treat Elvira very well either, and she definitely is in parts looking down on her. But I do think it's interesting that they take a more nuanced take on her. Ana del Toro is, I mean, superb as a stepmother. She is playing this character with just the perfect amount of viciousness, and there are parts where you feel just the slightest twinge of pity for her because you know she's been raised up in this system of body image as well, and she is wanting to do everything she can to keep up her own body image. It's all very interesting, even if she has to live vicariously through her daughter. I think this movie was well done. I don't have many major critiques of it. I do think there are parts of it where it can move a little bit slow. And like I said, I do think that the commentary can be maybe a little bit on the nose, sort of like the substance, but at the same time, I do think that was part of the point in this movie, and I do like what it was going for. Solid 3.5 out of 5 stars. I think a pretty cool take on the Cinderella fairy tale. Next up is Clown in a Cornfield, which is being called a return to the basics of the slasher genre, and yeah, I think that's a pretty accurate name for this, for better and for worse. This movie has the aesthetics of a Friday the 13th movie, but the storyline of a Scream movie is how I would describe it, if that tells you anything. This group of people, they are living in this small town. Specifically, our main character moves into this small town. Her name is Quinn, along with her dad. And of course, as you might expect, our main character has reservations about moving and didn't really want to. But as she makes friends with this group of teenagers who doesn't seem to be particularly well liked by the town at large, she starts to see some suspicious things about the small town, and there is this lore about this serial killer in a clown outfit that goes around and kills teenagers for whatever reason. And yeah, I mean, this movie's fine. I don't really have much to say about it. It's fine for a return back to the slasher genre. I wasn't expecting much out of it. I think I got what I expected. It's fun enough, and I think the kills are fun. I think the clown is fun. But it doesn't really do much beyond that. There is a twist with the clown that is not that surprising because of how the movie is building it up, but I do think it is an okay enough twist, and the motivation for what they're doing is, I don't know. It's hard to say. The motivation for what they're doing is maybe a little bit silly, but it does work with the sort of satirical tone that this movie is taking. It's clearly not taking itself very seriously. I just wish there was more to say about this movie. It's fine for what it is, but slashers, they have to do a lot in the first place for me to really like them. I'm not a huge proponent of slashers, as horror movies are not my favorite genre by any means, and this one is just sort of a basic entry in there. Light 3 out of 5 stars for this one. Next up is the movie Mountainhead, and the main reason I was interested in seeing this movie is that it was directed by one of the creators of Succession, Jesse Armstrong. But unfortunately, that is a huge detriment to this movie, because this movie feels like a bad Succession episode that would have been laughed out of the Succession writing room floor. It is fascinatingly terrible in almost every way. I think the only thing it really has going for it are its good performances. I think Steve Carell is really good as Randall, although he just feels like a worse version of Logan Roy. He's going through health problems like Logan Roy in Succession was. Corey Michael Smith is fine as Venus, although once again, he feels like a Kendall Roy knockoff, and I mean, there wasn't much to write home about with him. Jason Schwartzman as Hugo Van Yalk is sort of the highlight of this movie. I think it is pretty funny, and this is the only good running joke in the movie, that he feels inferior because he has $500 million as opposed to the billion that his other 3 friends have, and because of that, he has this inferiority complex where he's constantly trying to suck up to the other richer people just to get into their good graces. It is the one good running joke in this movie that I did think worked for his character. I also think Rami Youssef is fine as Jeff, debatably the only semi-sympathetic character in here, and that is a very light sympathetic, but even at that, he's not that likable. And I did find some of the way he portrayed his character, especially in the climax, to be sort of funny, but only in a somewhat ironic way because of how stupid the plot surrounding it was. And yeah, the plot of this movie is pretty dumb. I do think it started out interesting with especially our main character Venus launching this essentially very powerful AI program that basically is so realistic and is spreading around so much disinformation that it's causing worldwide riots and deaths. Aren't rich people bad? That's really the main commentary that the movie has, and I don't think it has much to say beyond that. Now, Succession is very much so a show about bad rich people as well, but I think it has a lot more interesting to say than just, yeah, rich people are bad, let's hate watch them right now. Because the Succession characters are a lot more complex and interesting. They have much more going on with their characters. These characters never go beyond just being slimy rich people who want to get the upper hand on each other. And I think that makes for a very boring watching experience where you don't even like to hate these characters. I enjoyed watching Kendall Roy and Roman Roy and Shiv Roy because they were characters who were despicable but also interesting and also funny. These characters are none of those things. I do think Steve Carell put on an interesting performance, but I don't find Randall to be a very interesting character, and I also don't find Jeff or Venus to be very interesting either. It's just sort of like, yeah, I get what you're saying. Do you have anything more to say than that? And the movie never does. Never once. I found the cinematography to be very basic. They try to go into different rooms to make there be some variation, but it's not very interesting variation because the retreat they're staying at, Mountainhead Retreat, I guess it's called, is not interesting. The way it progresses is just gets increasingly silly to eventually where three of our characters make a resolution for something to do against another character that makes no sense whatsoever how they got to this conclusion. It is just incredibly dumb. And the movie ends in a very dissatisfactory way. You know, if one of the characters had actually done something extreme in the movie, that would have at least been interesting, but none of the characters even really do anything, and all feel like they're in the same place they started. It is terrible. And yeah, I just don't have much to laud about this movie at all. I found it to be incredibly dull, incredibly basic, and its commentary is just, it's an absolute nothing burger. 2 out of 5 stars for me. And finally, I don't want to say too much about this movie because I already talked about it in my Final Destination ranked video. Check that out if you haven't yet. But I did want to just briefly touch on Final Destination Bloodlines or Final Destination 6. I think this is another good entry in the Final Destination series. I found the opening death scene with the sky view to be pretty fun. Even if it is maybe a little bit CGI heavy in places, it was still well done. It is once again bringing death back and having a lot of fun kills. And yeah, I think that I really like the cast here. Maybe the most likable cast since the first Final Destination movie. And as I said in my Final Destination ranked, I think it is sort of a no-brainer to make the cast a family. It makes them that much more likable and you care that much more for them surviving. If there were any negatives, I would say that the ending of the movie sort of comes out of nowhere and is sort of a head-scratcher compared to the rest of the Final Destination endings. I don't know, it felt sort of random. And I do think that there are a couple of places where the movie is just sort of repeating a lot of the same beats of other Final Destinations, but at the same time, that is something you've come to expect of the Final Destinations. I still think this is a pretty solid one overall. I'll give this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. So yeah, that ends off this episode of Quick Movie Reviews. What were your thoughts on any of the movies I discussed? Let me know in the comments down below. And once again, my name is James, and I do reviews of both music and movies, along with the occasional commentary piece, so if any of that sounds interesting to you, then please leave a like on this video, and subscribe to my channel to see more content like that. But until then, I will see you on the next video.